Good morning. These are the Poachie Mountains, which is a lot of up and down Bahada. And I'm going to break here to talk a little anime.
Berserk.
Berserk is a violent fantasy anime tale of war set someplace approximating medieval Europe. It's a bloody sword fest with brutal stories of men at war. Guts is a huge muscled young swordsman, a loner with a chip on his shoulder and no particular place to go. He's also a dicing, slicing, killing machine. We first meet Guts as a veteran warrior in the first episode as he wanders into town and sends a message to the local ruler that the black swordsman has returned. Right away we get the sense that these two antagonists know each other from long ago and have been anticipating this reunion for a long time. But at the end of this introductory episode, the story switches to the past and we see a much younger but still deadly Guts. He's a loner now, apparently in his teens, with no plans beyond finding the next battle to fight. The rest of this anime takes place before the first episode we just watched. Guts' young life changes when he runs into a bunch of mercenary soldiers called the Band of the Hawk. The leader of this band is a pretty-faced, charismatic man named Griffin. He's more than just a fair-haired boy, though. He can move his sword with finesse, speed, and strength. He can be charming and sophisticated, or brutal and ruthless, as the situation demands. At first, Griffith pretty much has to force Guts to join his small wandering army for hire, but almost all this anime's 25 episodes concentrate on Guts' time with the Hawks. Guts seems the first warrior Griffith has met in a long time that can hold his own against him, and Griffith values him for that. Griffith's second in command is the pretty swordswoman Casca. She's also more than a pretty face, though, wielding a deadly blade herself. At first, she'll resent Guts for taking her place as the number 2 blade of the Hawks. The band is rounded out by a handful of soldiers we'll get to know by name and personality as we go along. Plus, there's a much larger throng of nameless minions who fill out the battlefield. The story runs for half a dozen episodes, with the Band of the Hawk fighting battles for hire and winning. These battles are brutal and bloody, more so than many TV shows would allow. The producer credits the late-night TV time slot for allowing him to strew corpses and splatter blood all over the battlefields as we get to know the characters who are members of the Hawk. This early part of the story seemed the weakest to me, mostly because it's populated by a series of stupefyingly incompetent enemies who are nonplussed that someone would dare to attack them from the rear. The purpose of it is mostly to get us comfortable with the characters and the Band of the Hawk and how they live their lives as mercenaries. But by the 9th episode, the story picks up an edge to it, and their characters develop a greater depth and complexity within the storytelling. And eventually, the Band of the Hawk doesn't have to deal with just sword-wielding enemies on the battlefield, but the more treacherous, smiling enemies at noble court. By the second half of the 25-episode series, the story really gets intense. And along the way, we'll get some deeper flashbacks into Guts' childhood as well, just in case you were interested in a flashback within a flashback. All the characters get pretty decent development throughout the story. Guts and Griffith are the main characters, with Casca close behind. But even some of the secondary members of the band, such as the cynical, grousing Corcus, or the handsome and clever Juno, or the quiet but lumbering Pippin will get some distinctive treatment. Don't get too attached to any of these characters, by the way, because this story knows how to be really brutal and cruel to its cast. The story is told covering a period of many years, as the Band of the Hawk will age physically and emotionally throughout the series. Guts will eventually learn to appreciate the company of his fellow mercenaries, at least sometime. He may not quite know what he wants to do with the rest of his life yet, but he's not a simple-minded butcher, and he's not some stammering, insecure teen. One could complain that Guts is too perfect a warrior. In one battle, he kills 100 enemies single-handedly. By the way, when I see a scene like that, I always have to wonder, after the 99th guy fell over dead, what was the 100th guy thinking? Maybe Guts is finally tired? Or maybe Guts will trip over a pile of bodies? Also, I'm not a fan of these fantasy swords the size of I-beams that must weigh more than the man holding it. For the other characters, Griffith is ruthlessly focused on achieving his life's ambition, and he'll do whatever it takes with no time for anything else. He's often content to play the field commander, letting Guts do the bloody point work. And he clearly has some interesting secrets hidden in his past as well. Koska's pretty good with a blade too, and usually pretty handy to have around in a fight. She's no doe-eyed maiden though she has loyalty, admiration, and gratitude for her commander, Griffith. But she's unable to get Griffith to appreciate her for anything besides her skill in battle, and it'll take her a long time to get over her initial resentment of Guts taking her place in the band. The continued evolution of these personalities will keep the story fresh as it moves along. The artwork nicely supports the progressing aging of the characters as the characters' faces mature with them. And I like the fact that the characters don't wear the same costume all day, every day for half a dozen years. They don and shed their armor and dress for the seasons and dress differently for visiting towns and court or just wandering around camp. The artwork is excellent throughout, though you will notice that it's 10 years old by now. There are many nice backgrounds and settings and good attention to detail in them. There are some pretty scenes set in the snow, and they were careful to watch the details by leaving footprints and hoofprints behind in that snow. On the other hand, if you're trying to pin this down to a specific period in medieval history, you're going to be confronted with a mishmash of architectures, fashion, and technology. The animation is cost-effective, by which I mean it uses plenty of stills and repetitive movements when it needs to. It also borrows heavily from Osamu Dazaki's style of dissolving action into still-painted images. The producer says Berserk cost 50% more per episode than the average Golden Time anime of that time, and I have to assume that most of that went into the detailed backgrounds and were spent on the battle scenes themselves, rather than going into the in-betweener budget.
Huh?
That swollen-headed...
The music is by Susumu Hirasawa. It's certainly not a traditional medieval heroic fantasy score, but I really like the sound of it. It acts almost as a counterpoint to the action on the screen. Most of his other anime music compositions have been for Satoshi Kon projects, such as Paprika and Paranoia Agent. Berserk is directed by Mahiko Takahashi, based on a much longer manga by Kentaro Miura. The anime tells only the early story arc from that manga, and so leaves out a few of the characters, such as Puck. As a result, manga purists may not provide it, but the anime can provide a satisfyingly self-contained chapter from a longer manga. That manga, by the way, is available from Dark Horse with English translation, by the way, if you're interested in following that longer story. There are strong supernatural fantasy elements in the Berserk story, but the anime only touches on those till very late in the story. And for the first 20 episodes, there's not much mystical going on, so when fairies and demons start popping up for the last 4 episodes, it's quite a change of style. The conclusion, and it's a real humdinger, pretty much sets up the very first episode that I mentioned earlier, which you'll probably then want to go rewatch to better appreciate. You may have to use a little imagination to bridge the gap between the very final episode and that first episode, though, and a few questions will still linger when it's over. I give Berserk 4 stars. It's a violent, often exciting anime about larger-than-life characters told with an epic heroic sweep. The title and its deserved reputation for mayhem may give you the impression it's nothing but blood and guts, but it has a surprisingly compelling story to tell and some interesting characters. Berserk is available in North America from Media Blasters, who recently re-released the entire complete set. I found the English voice dubbing fair. When the English voices aren't worrying about lip-syncing, such as voicing thoughts or speaking off-screen, they're really good at capturing emotions. But when they have to match the lip-sync, they have the usual problems. The DVDs have some extras, including character sketches, and an audio-only interview with manga creator Kentaro Miura, who declined to be interviewed on camera, and an interview with Toshio Nahani. There are also some lame English dubbing outtakes. I don't know why anyone likes those. With graphic violence and nudity, this one isn't for the kids.
Thanks for listening.